Welcome back. It's Saturday night. You're listening to America Now. I'm Barb Adams. Thanks so much for joining me. Well, I've got a great show lined up for you tonight, so I hope you stay for all 3 hours. But if you do miss any part, you can listen in any time to this or any of my shows in their entirety on my website, radioamericanow.com, under Archives. Well, for those of us living in the American Southwest from Texas to California, this summer from mid-July to mid-September, U.S. military special forces will be holding realistic military training exercises on our soils. While government sources and the mainstream media tell us the event, Jade 15, is nothing more than a massive field training exercise. Alternative sources are sounding the alarm bells. Joining me now is author and former statewide prosecutor and Deputy Attorney General of New Jersey, John J. Higgins. Together we form the nonpartisan Practical Solutions for America, and we ask that you join us here on air each week and on our Facebook page to work together to find common ground to solve the challenges in present-day America. If you'd like to join tonight's discussion, give us a call, 800-259-5791. Again, that's 800-259-5791. John, how you doing out there?
I'm doing good, Barb, and you?
I'm doing pretty well. How's the weather out there finally? Getting warm?
Oh, it was a little chilly today, but it was really beautiful out, so I always like it a little bit on the chilly side. I'm not much of a fan for the hot, humid, heated summers of the Northeast.
Yeah, I can imagine. At least it's finally warming up, and hopefully eventually will dry out for you out there. However, out here, it's going to get interesting, isn't it? Jade 15, John. The Internet's abuzz with stories about what may be in store for all of us. Military drills being conducted amongst the general population. That sounds like it could be a recipe for something very interesting.
Well, I think that, Americans, naturally, we have an aversion of any kind of superior force among us. And, we are rebels at heart. And the idea of having military exercises that are conducted, in civilian society, I have to say, is a reason to have some kind of, I don't want to say alarm, but certainly, an awareness, because I think that's a dangerous kind of precedent to be going on. I mean, I come from law enforcement. We train people in normal civilian society all the time. I went to a narcotics school where the state trooper I was with, he was driving on the sidewalk tracking somebody, but, so it's not like the law enforcement doesn't do those kinds of things, but it kind of makes one, have pause that the military is thinking that, first of all, the United States is going to be invaded, I guess, and I don't know by who. Certainly, I guess it would have to be the Mexicans from where you are, but Pancho V is long gone. Or if it's some kind of, civilian insurrection, I mean, that's kind of nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this training is supposedly about hostiles, learning to do hostile taking. And it's like, designating certain states, like Texas and I believe Utah and parts of New Mexico. Those are the hostile areas. And then evidently there's supposedly Southern California is where the insurgents are. Just having that on a map out there, whether this is totally 100% correct or not, I'm assuming that map was correct. Just to put that in the minds of people and not to have most civilians out there in our states totally knowing anything about this. We're going to have these people running around stealing vehicles or doing whatever, acting like they're terrorists or whatever on our soil. And then the other special ops troops supposedly are going to be trying to catch them, I guess. But in the process, there's going to be a lot of spooked people out there.
Well, unless they're going to get dressed up like the 7th Cavalry and Geronimo's returning, right, down in New Mexico. I think that's part of the problem with this whole thing is that, I'm not really a fan, and maybe that goes back to my study of history, of a large standing army. I think that it's always got potential dangers, to it, and it's got to be watched closely. it doesn't take much for, you know, a disgruntled general or whatever with loyalty to them, you know, to do some kind of maneuver. History's riddled with people doing that. So this idea that it's being part of the norm of what's going to go on in American society is really a very bad precedent.
You know, there have been other operations they've done, obviously, training, you know, practices and exercises. But this one seems so massive at this point. That's what's got me a little bit more interested in it, as I'm sure most people are when they start hearing about this. This covers a wide area.
Yeah, right. And I know when I looked at it, and I saw some of the stranger, you know, versions of what they thought was going on. Was, you know, one version started with that, you know, Obama was not going to give up the presidency in 2016, which sounds ludicrous to me. But, you know, and it goes all the way to the extreme that they think the Walmarts that are closed down for plumbing problems are going to be used as centers to process civilians, I guess, to put them in some kind of internment camps, which, you know, it makes one, you know, you say there, well, it could be all the conspiracy theorists, but, you know, sometimes the conspiracy theorists have some truth in what their, you know, paranoia is.
Definitely, definitely. And it's not always paranoia. A lot of conspiracy theories have proven to be true. And that's the whole point. I think we need to have healthy skepticism about all these types of things and try to gather as much information as possible. But that's the problem, John, as you and I both know, because everywhere in the media, whether it be mainstream or the alternative, there's a lot of misinformation on purpose and even unintentionally, because a lot of parroting goes on and people hear a part of a story, they pick it up, they take it, they run with it, somebody else picks that up, keeps it going, it just keeps building. So it's hard to discern where the truth lies.
Right, and then occasionally you do get somebody who really does pop out from the veil and reveals what's really going on, and you stand there like dumbfounded, like Snowden or that one guy's got a life sentence in military prison now who gave up the information about the torture that was going on.
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, we do need to know certain things. And I agree. There's a certain level we may not need to know, but these days, considering all that is happening in the world, and especially within our borders, and the level of distrust we now have, rightly so, with the government, you know, we really need to be paying attention to all this kind of stuff.
Right, and I think that there should be some kind of policy that they can't be doing these kind of maneuvers. I mean, if you're going to the desert and you're training for going into an invasion of Iraq or something, I certainly understand that. But I don't know any other country in the world that's the equivalent of the United States that you'd be in the same kind of circumstances in to do an invasion or, you know, to repel an invasion.
Well, supposedly that's it. You know, what I've heard from military sources, you know, out there when you look on the web, and who knows if these are true too, that it's supposedly preparing us because, you know, the face of terror changes constantly and we need to be preparing for this. Well, prepare somewhere else. I mean, and yes, it's probable it's happened everywhere else in the world. You know, terrorism does happen. But again, we have terrorism that's homegrown here within our own borders. And that's another problem going on. And we've already seen some of that in the past. We don't know what this is. And it's got us spooked. So we're going to continue this discussion about Jade Helm 15 on the other side of the break here on America Now. All right, everybody, welcome back. You're listening to America Now. John Higgins and I discussing Jade Helm 15 currently. And John, you know, I wonder what's going to happen when all the so-called players are on the ground with this.
Well, I assume they have clearance with local law enforcement, because otherwise that might be one crazy scenario going on.
Yeah.
Like you said before the break, I was going, if there were terrorists in this country that were creating a problem, I can't imagine a local law enforcement is not capable of handling it. My God, we've given them tanks, you know. I mean, they have all kinds of paramilitary equipment today. I mean, you know, the terrorism is basically done by small cells. It's not like an army's going to collect somewhere along the line that you'd be sending the military in. I mean, we have National Guards in every state. We got I don't know your law enforcement base, but, I've got local police, I've got county police, I've got state police, I've got Division of Criminal Justice, detectives, not counting any of the federal agents,
Oh, and then there's Homeland Security. Don't forget Homeland Security.
Absolutely, which is a composite of all of those groups. So, why we're having the military do any of this, like I say, is so against, anything. I know the founding fathers literally that was one of the biggest, discussions they had. They were scared to death of the idea of having a standing army during peacetime. Part of their debate wound up of what was going to happen, that in terms of funding it, that they would always have control over it because it'd be funded in a 2-year cycle with, Congress and whatever. But I was reading something actually today from Alexander Hamilton, publishing under whatever his fake name was at the time, that, it was only if over a long period of time that they were entrenching themselves during these legislative, budgetary cycles and stockpiling things and whatever, that they would become a danger. And we are exactly what he was predicting that could become the danger.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, too. And then when you start thinking about all these people talking about, Second Amendment and the government purchasing those massive quantities of ammunition.
Right. And if you can't ban the guns, buy up the bullets.
Right.
So it makes it very difficult for you to do that. The ATF this past year, I come from, we were selling guns. We had a gun business when I was a kid. I was away from it, probably for a couple of decades now, but I certainly know most of the stuff. And, it's .223 ammunition that is the stuff that goes into M16s or the AR-15s, which are the civilian models. They want to get rid of those guns, so what they were going to do is absolutely ban, the possession of .223 ammunition. And finally, enough people complained that they backed off on that. But, that's kind of a screwy set of maneuvers to me. Look, most people are law-abiding. If you're law-abiding, the idea that you've got to make, items illegal because there's a certain percentage of people who break the law is not the way this country is based, nor should it be.
Yeah, it really seems like we're getting more and more restrictions placed upon us, and it really makes no sense to me. And going back to, I'm thinking about this with the whole scenario with this Jade Helm 15. Evidently, these people are going to be wearing some sort of emblems on their sleeves, and the whole idea of this is you can make a connection to history with that one if you really start digging.
Absolutely. And then at what point do they start restricting, civilians from moving into certain areas or whatever? I mean, anything that the military does is classified to a great degree. And like you just mentioned, this Homeland Security's got to be tied into this somewhere. And the amount of knowledge they have about people is really frightening. This is always the problem when there's some kind of crisis. When, 9/11 was certainly a crisis. And you've got to be really wary that you start giving up all your rights in terms of trying to find safety. And what happens is that your rights will be gone forever. They don't come back. And the next thing you know, all of a sudden, the Republicans are in power. They don't like the Democrats. The Democrats are in power. They don't like the Republicans, or whatever it is. And then you're on a list.
Yeah, and those lists are going to be easily compiled. And when they start talking about insurgents and hostiles and actually putting them out there, and they're doing hostiles, taking training, that's really spooky at that point. Because what kind of hostiles? We don't know. They're guising it under training for terrorism. But now they get to define who the terrorists are. And they get to define who the hostiles are, right? Absolutely. One of the things that has bothered me, because, with having a pilot's license, is this idea that, the FAA was approving drones. First of all, to me, it's a safety issue when you're flying an aircraft. The last thing you need is some idiot flying one of those other things that is not communicating with you, and you don't even know where they are.
But the amount of surveillance from, a prosecutor's perspective, I would love to have drones that I would do over every kind of undercover buy or sale or whatever. But, my God, that means that you can be under constant, not only surveillance, but under a threat of being, attacked because we use them overseas all the time.
Mm-hmm. We use them here more and more and more. And let's go back to those Walmart closures, too. I mean, that whole thing is just as screwy as it gets. Because when you consider they closed all these Walmarts for, quote, plumbing problems, but that they're closing them for, a minimum of 6 months or more? I mean, what kind of plumbing problems could you have on something like that? And the timing. You have to look at the timing of these closures. Okay, on one hand, yes, there were people trying to organize, especially in California with the Walmarts, trying to get decent pay, which they should have every right to. And so possibly it's tied to that. The closures are tied to, breaking up unions, breaking up groups of people who want to lobby for better pay as workers. But on the other hand, look at the timing of it now, too, with all of this talk of Jade. I mean, I can see why people make these connections.
Well, and in some ways, I mean, you connect that dot, it works. It shouldn't work.
I know, that's
right?
Scary, isn't it, right?
Yeah, right. I mean, that to me always is, that's always the hard part, doing an investigation into something, is you're trying to connect the dots. You try to find quickly which dots don't connect, because then you don't have to waste time pursuing that vein. But when the dot kind of connects, you go, ooh, I don't know. And I've done, I rehab the train station, so, plumbing is something I do kind of have a sense of. In 6 months, you could build a whole Walmart store. I can't imagine what plumbing problem you could possibly have that you're predicting that you're going to close the store for 6 months. I mean, that can't be helping their revenue stream.
Obviously, probably not. All right, we'll pick this up on the other side of the break. Stay with us. All right, everybody, talking Jade Helm 15 here this hour with John J. Higgins. And John, let's go back to the media, because there's so much, as we mentioned, so much news out there about this. All sorts of sources. Although the mainstream media is kind of being fairly quiet about it. There's just, you can Google this till there's no end to what you'll find out there. But we need to learn how to discern. That's the big thing. I think what people really need to know, and, we talk about practical solutions. What news should we believe? How do you learn to discern?
Well, I think as we've discussed before, I think that, the media has become sectionalized in many ways and sensationalized so that they're looking for whatever is going to appeal to what their demographic group has become. I mean, the days of having, I grew up in the days of Walter Cronkite. If he basically said it, you believed him because he seemed to have vetted it and didn't have some kind of other agenda. He seemed honest about what he was doing, and, there was Huntley and Brinkley and all of that. But, today, I don't know that there's any real news source that one can rely on totally. They get skewed one way or the other. The amazing thing is that most of them are showing the exact same stories. Like, if you have a team of reporters, wouldn't you be trying to dig up into something new? And
it's interesting, but like we've talked about before, John, most of them are owned by the same big major corp.
Absolutely, and one of them is owned by a foreigner. I mean, which makes me nervous. The British, they have their own kind of thing going on, but when there's a whole network owned by a Brit and they're dealing with the news over here, that kind of makes me a little on the nervous side as well.
Yes, the British have landed again, haven't they? Just in a different form.
Absolutely. And then, when they talk about things being fair and balanced, and you watch what they're telling you, and it's like, I don't know that that's true at all. Some of the stuff is pretty wacko. That, it's hard to believe what they're telling you, and that becomes part of the problem. And I think that, we've got to go back where we had real investigatory reporters But, the reporters, they're being judged on, how many hits they're getting on YouTube or, all of those kinds of things. The Fourth Estate in the United States, which was supposed to try to keep the government honest and transparent, is failing.
Yeah, very much so. Well, people, the whole point is journalists aren't rewarded either a lot of times for what they do. So, as you say, they need to get the hits online, so they're just going to pick up the story and run with it. They're not really being paid. We need to put our money into these types of things where we can get people actually interested again. And another point would be to get people being of service. Come on, people, step up. If you see something, report it and get it out there. But John, I think another whole level of this is because we've learned not to be able to trust what's being put out in front of us, we don't know how to learn what to trust anymore. They've got us running in circles.
Well, and I think also for the reporters or whatever, for any employee, that's what's become the norm, is that very few people have any sense of job security today. They're all afraid that their job is going to be, taken over, shipped overseas. The company's going to be bought out, and it's going to be another company where you're like duplicative in your job, and so you're going to be unemployed. So that's where people get into these positions that they do pretty screwy things because they'll do anything to hold on to their jobs. So they're not going to go to the next level. And, when everybody's afraid, it just increases that whole sense of, I've got to do what they tell me to do, or I've got to keep my mouth shut, or all of those kinds of things. The whistleblowers lawsuits, any one that I've ever seen, has always backfired on the whistleblower where they should have been commended. Go back to that military guy who revealed all about the torture stuff. He gets sentenced to prison for his entire life now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I mean, that's listening to a moral code that's above, this reliance on, what a command structure tells you to do. We saw what happened in Nuremberg with the Nazis doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. You just hit the nail on the head there. That's what's, how many similarities do we have to keep pointing out? People are noticing the similarities of what's going on here with what happened there.
Well, I think part of the problem, too, is that I'm not, again, and it goes back to the educational system. We seem to have lost the basics in terms of the history of the country and the history of the world. Most people really don't. They don't. I was a senior in college, and I was trying to explain the intricacies of what I was doing at the governor's office with these commissions and committees. And as I was sitting there, I have seniors in college looking at me dumbfounded. They didn't understand there were three branches of government.
What?
So my lecture became all about the three branches of government, which they should have learned in fifth grade.
But they don't really teach, as far as I know, at least talking to some friends, so many of these basic things, civics and all of these types of things, are no longer really being taught in many of the mainstream public schools.
Right, and what it is that's the structure that controls your life. If you think it doesn't, then you've got something. You're going to be just washed away in the wash, because they're going to maneuver all around you, and you won't even know what happened. But again, I think that we've got to be really working in terms of making people get into jobs where they feel that they have some kind of security, they have a voice again, and that means we've got to stop a lot of these. We got that screwball, another foreign trade agreement that we never get the good end of that stick.
No, we never do. And did you just hear about China and Russia investing in South America here again very recently in the last couple of days? I mean, huge amounts of money. I mean, these things are, there are concerns out there, but at the same time, if you're trying to buy friends, that usually doesn't work.
Well, we're not buying friends for this country. What we're doing is we're buying friends for the corporations.
There we go. Yeah, let's get into that a bit.
It keeps coming back to that. It's not American interests, it's corporate interests overseas. look, the Middle East is a quagmire. It always was. It probably will be that way for another 1,000 years, or as long as oil has any value. I mean, the real way to deal with that from a national security standard is to get us out of the oil game. You're never going to win that oil game with them. So we've got brilliant people in this country. We can't move into some other means of energy that is safe and usable.
Not as long as we have the oil corporation people at the top controlling the strings.
Absolutely. And, I was thinking, too, because I know the corporations always scream about how they have regulations and all those kinds of things.
Oh, yeah.
And I worked in industry for 7 or 8 years, and these people would pollute left and right if they did. It was only when they get caught that the regulation gets put in place because they do something that is outrageous. And so any regulations that are coming at them are their own doing. If they would behave like normal, responsible people, they wouldn't have all of those regulations on them, because you would expect that some company that moves into a town isn't going to try to pollute the water supply.
But there's a catch-22 with that one when you say they have to behave as people. They are people, right? Citizens United.
Right. They're people when it comes to rights, but they're not people when it comes to responsibilities.
Exactly. All right, we'll pick that up on the other side, John. All right, stay with us. More to come here on America Now. All right, everybody, welcome back. Talking about corporatism right now, John Higgins and I. And John, we were talking about the problems with all of this, with the corporations getting so big. And basically, there's this whole new economic system that's been emerging because of this. And we are really locked into this system.
Oh, absolutely. They've twisted capitalism into a way that, it's not individual people any longer. It's become this like oligarchy behind these protections that we give corporations. So, like we were talking about before, that, the personhood piece only works when there's a benefit. As soon as it's a responsibility, that vanishes, and there's some kind of protection that's put in between them. And in that way, they're getting to the point that they are really controlling the government, if you think about it. They have all kinds of power. They have control. The legislators or the congressmen or the senators, depending on the level, are passing laws all the time to give them benefits. New Jersey, we're riddled with all of these deals that have been cut in the last 4 years, like $5 billion worth, with these corporations, while our economy is down in the tank.
Yeah, and so many of them, John, as we've talked about before, are multinational now, and there's no real loyalty to any one particular country. They can just play it one off the other.
Oh, absolutely. So they find the country that has the lowest tax rate, or will require the least amount of regulation upon them. I mean, they danced around the United States over the last 100 years, where they get free taxes in a municipality or whatever. Then, since there was no real regulations for environmental protections at the time, they created all kinds of havoc, in that local community. And when it came time for them to have to pay taxes, they upped themselves, and they were being wooed by, another state to come because they'll get them there for free. And then it actually destroyed, the inner, superstructure that was in those cities where these companies were. And now they were stuck with all of these environmental, messes.
Yeah, and they just can pick up and move on, go somewhere else. It all works for them. And they also can play workers off each other, especially country to country. And it was criminal, absolutely criminal, with the tech industry and Apple and many of the other ones, with what they were doing, with that industry, especially in China.
Right, and that's going on, and there'll be the devil to pay before that is over. Because my prediction is that at some point those other countries, where they have these factories where they're not paying the workers anything, and they're polluting and selling products that are known to be a problem, particularly like tobacco. Those countries at some point are going to hold them for accounting, and they're going to take their stuff. and they're really going to harm them. And my bet is that even if they move their headquarters over to Belgium, they'll be coming crying to the U.S. Congress that they've been harmed, and the American citizenry has to bail them out.
Yep. Yeah, well, we have seen example after example of that happening to us. You know, every time there's a problem, we have to up the ante here. Taxpayers, you know, and the middle class has been gutted because of it.
Right, and the game of really playing this thing about the workers, you know, it's I really believe that there's some kind of movement among these corporate people and their paid shills in the political offices. You know, they want to make right to work states. They want to get rid of minimum wage. They want to, they want to make us all be like, it's going to be probably the most improper thing I can say, but like, what we used to be known as the Chinese coolies that were working on the railroads.
Serfs. They want us serfs.
Yes, absolutely. And, I beyond just an economic disaster that it's going to create, because if you don't have people who can buy your product because they don't have enough money to buy it, it means you're not going to sell anything. I mean, there's a morality to it that, I don't know how those people lay their heads down on their pillows at night.
But they have all those fancy sheets there, nice, expensive ones, John. Hey.
Right, exactly. or they're Christians with a Bible that it's not the one I've read.
No, I don't think that was the one most people did, But the problem is they've got us hooked. We both worship and fear them because we worship the goods they give us. They get us hooked on this stuff. And then we find out we're addicted to this stuff, and we can't even function in society without their stuff. So we're really hooked.
Right. Well, if you keep buying up all the competitors or whatever, you start ending up with monopolies, and de facto or for real. And then when the government, because everybody hates big government at least from one political party, and so you got their ability to hold them accountable. These things, there's a reason that there were anti-monopoly laws and those sorts of things. They get away with it, and then the next thing you know, you have nowhere else to go to buy whatever it is.
Yeah. So what do we do about all this? What would be a practical solution to all of this mess, considering we've got, these big military training exercises coming? We've got the corporations turning us into serfs. Fun times ahead, John.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And each generation has its challenges, and I think these are the challenges that are coming to us. The issues for us isn't abortion. It's not gay marriage. I mean, anybody who's talking about that, as far as I'm concerned, is delusional and a cloud. Yeah. I mean, these are the real problems, and I think there's more and more voices that are joining in terms of thinking this way, that there's a fundamental unfairness. The game is rigged, and it's got to change. And whether it means at some point, that we decide that, we start doing, corporate boycotting. If you don't like Exxon, then you don't buy Exxon products. You don't buy gasoline at them. At some point, you do have the power not only in the vote, but where you spend your money. And if you exercise that and you target it, you may make them hurt.
Yeah, and you hit that on the head there, John. It's the money, because that's what they're all about anyway. They're controlling the political system now through the money. So we still outnumber all of them when you really think about it. Yes, they may be mega big as far as that goes, but, there's an awful lot of us out here who need to... who can have a say through the money.
Absolutely, and with your vote. If you have, we get congressmen and senators here for life. Stop voting for them. Vote for somebody else. Yeah. When the primary comes, you vote for somebody else, just because they've been there too long.
Well, and that's the whole thing, too, Start listening, really listening. Have town hall meetings. Listen to what people are saying at local levels. Find people who are willing to serve and step forward, who are actually saying they're looking for solutions and not being part of the problem going on. And we're going to have to find new people to come up from the ranks, within our ranks. We the people, to step forward and really understand what it means to serve and come forward.
Yes. And the other thing that's going to be kind of, refreshing to me is that I've seen a couple of videos. Now, I don't know whether they're the anomalies or it's starting to be a movement, but, a lot of the Tea Party people are now saying they're going to vote Democratic because they didn't get anything from the Republicans at all. It's about time they woke up. They're voting for a rich man's agenda, and they ain't got squat.
That's the whole point. And really, both sides. Same coin. just little different, just a different. The agenda's the same. Doesn't matter. Let's start looking on the edge. Let's find ourselves again and really pick this up and turn it around. And I think we will do this. I'm an optimist.
And don't drink the corporate Kool-Aid that they're giving you better living through chemistry, or they're doing it all for you, because they're not.
Yeah, no. It's their bottom line. It's their shareholders. They have obligations they need to fulfill. Bottom line, it's all about the money. But in the end, it won't be, because there's something much higher than that. And that's what this American experiment was all about. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about power. It wasn't about any of that, John. And I really believe we're going to turn it around.
And it's about liberty at the end of the day. And what's becoming is that we're becoming indentured servants to all these moneyed interests, which is taking our freedom in a whole other way.
Yeah. Well, we've kind of run out of time here, unfortunately, but we'll have time to talk about this again soon, I'm sure. All right, everybody, stick around.